The reading this morning is from the 6th chapter of Mark. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized them and saw them leaving, and people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Later in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat." But Jesus said, "You feed them." "With what?" they asked. "We'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people." "How much bread do you have?" he asked. "Go and find out." They came back and reported, "We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." Then Jesus told the disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up towards heaven, and blessed them. Then breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed. The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart.
I invite you to be seated. The Lord be with you. So I served my first call in a small community in Syracuse, Nebraska, and my job was a part-time associate pastor. Part of that role was teaching our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade Wednesday night confirmation class. As a treat to the students, we would end every semester of the year with Stump the Pastor. So during the year, we would collect all of their questions in an ice cream bucket. It was all decorated, said Stump the Pastor with lots of question marks all over it. It was a lot of fun. And they would put their questions throughout the year and the semester in that bucket. Partially this was because we needed something fun to do on the last day of class when nobody really wanted to pay attention. And partially it was because it was the only way I could figure out how to redirect all of the distracting questions that they tried to ask to get us off topic on Wednesday nights, that they would try and derail conversations. And we got to be able to just say, just put it in the bucket, we'll answer it later. It's a great, it just worked really well, right? But then during the last class of the semester, the pastoral staff, which was 3 of us, 2 pastors and a deacon, would come up and we would open the bucket, and without looking, we would draw questions and answer them. It's a really dangerous thing to do with a group of junior high students. Let me tell you, there were rules about we could not answer any question we didn't feel was appropriate, but it was a lot of fun. And without fail, every year that I did it, every semester we did it, mixed in with the questions about where in the Bible does X happen, or where in the Bible, or why do we believe this, or what do we believe about this, there would be at least a question or two about if some story in the Bible were true, right? Is the Bible true? And when this question came up, or some version of this question came up, we would always refer back to what we talked about kind of in that first week of confirmation. And one thing I know, and I'm pretty sure we talked about here in our questions sermon series, and that is the difference between the little t truth and big T truth. Little t truth is scientific truth, scientific fact. Those things that we can look at and prove, we know because we can observe and experiment and know that it is fact. Big T truth is God's truth. It's truth that we can't necessarily prove. We can't tactilely touch something that proves us. We can't do an experiment and make sure that we, have the hypothesis and prove it wrong or right and whatever. And I find that often when we get stuck on our little t truth questions, the hows, the whys, the whens, we lose sight of the big T truths about God. And I find this often be true with the story of the feeding of the 5,000, right? Most of us have a lot of questions about how this miracle worked, right? We get stuck on the questions about how did 5 loaves and 1 fish or 2 fish feed 5,000 people? But also remember, it wasn't 5,000 people, right? The story ends with 5,000 people plus their families. So that means women and children were also fed. So more than 5,000 people. We get stuck in this debate of did it actually multiply magically? Or was it just a bunch of people deciding to finally contribute out of what they had in their pockets? How did the food get passed out? How did that distribution system work? How long did this take? Can you imagine feeding 5,000 people? And we get stuck on these maybe y'all don't, maybe y'all are better than me. I get stuck on the little t questions, and we miss the big T truth answers that is being told in this story. To be fair, I imagine the disciples had some little t questions as well, right? Can you imagine Jesus, holds up the bread and breaks it and then gives it to the disciples and says, go feed them. And I just imagine, those conversations you have with the closest people in your life that require no words, and it's all with the eyes, and it's right? How are we supposed to feed? I don't know. Does he know who's going to have to deal with the riot when we can't actually feed everyone? I don't know, dude. Just feed the people. Do what he said. He's never been wrong before, right? The disciples are about to learn, or I think as the case is true for the disciples often, they're about to relearn the thing that they've been being taught over and over and over again. They are about to learn that our limited human understanding does not limit God, right? They are about to learn that just because all that we often see and all that they can see right in that moment is the limits and the impossibilities, it does not stop God from doing what seems impossible. Because over and over and over again, the Bible tells us the big T truth that God is a God of the impossible and abundance. When I was in college, on a summer break, reading for who knows why, because it was actually a break from all the reading I had to do during the school year, but I had a book that a professor had recommended that I read. And it was a collection of essays written throughout people's lives from folks who had lived through and impacted challenging and hard times, right? Folks like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Rosa Parks, and then some other folks in environmental and medical activism and just all over in the world who worked for what seemed impossible. And this, I read it a few more years ago than I care to admit at this point, because I do the math on this and it's never the 5 years ago that I thought it was. And I don't remember much of the essays, but the title of the book hangs out in the back of my mind a lot. And the title of the book was borrowed from a Billie Holiday song, and the title of the book is The Impossible Will Take a Little While. The full lyric from the song is, the difficult I can do right now, but the impossible will take a little while. And I think this quote hangs out in the back of my mind right now because along with the feeding of the 5,000, we live in a time where impossibility feels like the story of the day, right? And the reality actually is that most of us are doing difficult things every single day. We are raising children and caring for aging parents. We are undergoing cancer treatments and moving away from family to seek new opportunities. And just at bare minimum, most of us are getting up and getting out of bed every day when it feels like there's no reason to and the world just feels like it's falling apart around us. We do difficult things every single day. And so the impossible is just going to take a little bit longer than that difficult. right? And the folks who were writing, and these essays are in this book, they knew this. They knew that change and a better world did not occur overnight. They knew that it would take a while to be born, and even when it felt impossible for them, they knew that they had to work towards that, because in doing so, they would inch us towards a world where the impossible became possible. I want to just take a moment for us to think about the fact that we actually live in a world of impossibilities, right? My earworm for this week was another Carrie Newcomer song called Impossible Until It's Not, and it opens with this line that says, "Engineers say bumblebees can't fly. Their wings are too short and their bodies too wide, but there one goes a-wanderin' by. It happens all the time." And the chorus of this song is just over and over again, it's impossible until it's not, right? We live in a world of impossibilities. There is a time where my standing in front of you as your pastor was an impossibility. There is a time when us and the fact that we are live streaming this entire service was an impossibility. There was a time where those cars out in the parking lot that you all drove to get here was an impossibility. And now on a daily basis, I have one or drive by one that is driving itself. Right? Like we have gone from those being impossible to the ones driving themselves. We are living in the future, y'all, right? We carry the impossible in our pockets. How many of you have a cell phone on you? Do you know that you carry more computing power in your pocket than was on the first flight of NASA? You carry the impossible every day. Not to mention the fact that we have cures for diseases that once took the lives of children. We live past the age of 40. I've watched preemies in the NICU who never should have survived grow to adults. We have indoor plumbing. I would just like to thank God for the impossibility of indoor plumbing, right? The impossible is everywhere. It just takes a while to be born. Several summers ago, I got a chance to serve for a week at Chautauqua Institution in upstate New York. And I got this this role serving 1 week as the summer for their once a summer multi-denominational communion service that they have. And it happens in this building that you can see here, their amphitheater. And we served an average of 4,000 people communion on that Sunday morning, right? And I will tell you that I started planning this service and the logistics. All I had to do was plan the communion. Somebody else was taking care of all of the other worship. All I had to do was the logistics of serving 4,000 people communion. And let me tell you that with even 6 months of planning, 20 plus communion stations, taped arrows on the floor directing traffic for which station people were headed to, well-trained ushers, it still takes several choral anthems and a couple communal hymns to feed 4,000 people communion. And this image popped into my head because I thought about how long that took. And can you imagine serving 5,000 people, not just communion, but a whole meal? Because the story doesn't say, right, like Jesus blessed the bread and then magically in each of these groups appeared enough food for everybody. It just showed up in front of them, right? That's not how the story goes. It says Jesus broke bread and then gave it to his disciples to pass out and distribute, and continued distributing it until all were fed. And if I put myself in the place of the disciples, I imagine the worry and the fret and the, ooh, are we going to run out of food? I think we're going to run out of food. And then, maybe we're not going to run out of food. Maybe this will be okay, right? The nerves and the anxiety that exist in that. And it takes several hours, and it takes some nerves and some anticipation and some anxiety. But the impossible happens. It took a while, but it happened, y'all. 5,000 people and children and women and children were fed. Which I think brings us back to where we started, to our little t questions of how. How did 5,000 plus get fed with 12 baskets of leftovers. And there seem to be kind of two camps when we talk about this story, right? One is it was not a miracle. Jesus didn't actually divide anything. It's just people actually deciding to pull out of what they had in their pockets and share. And then there's it's only a miracle. It was Jesus and miraculous bread that just kept going and going and going. And the more I sit with this story, the farther I get in life, the more I am convinced that this is a place where two things are true at the same time. Which I think means there were actually two miracles here instead of just one. The first miracle, I think, is that in Jesus' action and sharing, he moves people from their fear and scarcity into abundance and sharing. Which, if you know anything about human nature, when we're afraid, the move to abundance and sharing is a miracle in and of itself. That people actually shared out of what they had, even when it didn't feel enough. And the second miracle is that, yes, even though people shared and gave out of what they had, I think God's Spirit still moved through all that was shared and multiplied it in ways that just, frankly, don't math. I am not good at math. It's not my strong suit. There's a reason I'm a pastor and not an accountant. But even I know that even if everybody had shared out of what they had, that still does not add up to baskets of leftovers, right? Even if every person had pulled out what they had, that still just equals everybody getting fed, not 12 baskets of leftovers, right? So the great lesson for me out of this story is that we partner with God to make the impossible possible. We come to God with what we have, and God turns it into so much more, right? Jesus doesn't magically make bread appear. He asks the disciples what they have and then does something with it. There's a quote from Pope Francis that often echoes in the back of my head when I think about how we as people are called to address all of the pain and the hurt in this world as partners with God. And he says, "You pray for the hungry, then you feed them. That is how prayer works. You pray and then you act." As humans, the reality is we cannot address the largeness of the hurt and brokenness in the world. That is beyond our scope. We are only human after all. And so we come to God in prayer. We bring all of the heaviness and the grief that we carry, all of our hope for a broken and hurting world, and we lay it down at God's feet. But we also don't show up empty-handed. God has created each one of us and called us into something so that we can address all of that hurt and brokenness in our own world, right? Jesus asked the disciples, "What do you have to offer?" And God says the same to us, and we come to prayer and to faith with who we are, with all of our gifts and our talents and everything that we can offer, with a promise that we will use it to make the world a better place, and we offer it into God's hands, and then because God is a God of abundance, God multiplies it in ways that just, frankly, don't math, that doesn't make sense. God works through what we have to offer, not producing miracles out of thin air, but expanding what is already there to make this world better. Right? We heard this in the first week, in that first story of water into wine. We know this story, but remember that it's Jesus turning water into wine, and it's not just like mediocre wine, right? The steward says it is the best wine. We hear it this week when Jesus doesn't just kind of soothe people's hungers a little bit so they're not hangry and they can get home and then feed themselves. There is a feast with leftovers. Jesus takes what is offered, and it is definitely not enough, and turns it into abundance, more than they can possibly eat. As a side note to this, I got to have a text study this week with a couple of my clergy friends, and they're all doing the same series. And one of them shared that she had a seminary professor say when they were studying this text, he said, "I can't believe God would waste so much food." Yeah, right? It then led us down this rabbit hole of talking about what happened to the 12 baskets of food. And we started to wonder, who got fed? Who was at home? Who was not on the hill that day that got fed? because somebody could bring home food to their sick child, or their elderly parents, or their next door neighbor who could not get out of the house? Who got fed that didn't know where their next meal was coming from? Because God doesn't do things halfway. God is a God of abundance. And the people on that hillside got to experience it and then share it, right? God's abundance is never waste. It only becomes waste when we forget to share. The good news, dear ones, right? In this season when it seems like there's not a lot of good news, when it feels like the impossible is all that there is with politics and life and just getting along with one another, right? It feels like there is a lot going wrong. It feels like impossible is all there is. So in this season of Lent, and tell me something good, y'all, the good news, dear ones, is that together with God, the impossible becomes possible. It just might take a little while. And all of God's people said, Amen. I invite you to stand and join us in singing.